Fill your thirst beside the river. Wash the journey from your hands. Feel the comfort flow inside you. Come this far, you understand.
Hi, welcome to Healing Outside the Box. I'm Rosemary Lachance, an energy healer and a spiritual teacher and therapist. I am your host for this thought-provoking series, and I'm dedicated to providing you with food for thought information and answers to all modalities of alternative healing, spiritual development, animal welfare, environmental concerns, and so much more in the form of guest speakers who are experts in their fields. This series is recorded, will be shown in your area on your local public service cable network. Please contact them for dates and times. Please visit my website and click on My TV Show, where you will find a wealth of information about this show. These shows are now available to you to watch free on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and type in Healing Outside the Box and make your choice. We are constantly adding new shows, so keep checking back. We're also on Facebook under Healing Outside the Box. Please like our page for the latest information about the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Okay. Tonight is our 199th show. Whoa. And it's part 2 of Spiritual Dimension of Natural Healing. And our guest tonight is a very distinguished and dear friend, Dr. Sesenig.
Thank you.
Hi, Doc.
Nice to be
How
here
you
again.
doing?
Very good.
Good. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Sesenig. He has been practicing naturopathic medicine for nearly 40 years and is well known for helping thousands of people regain their health. Dr. Sesenig sees patients with complaints of all kinds and is particularly interested in the treatment of digestive diseases, headaches and migraine, joint and muscle complaints, and chronic fatigue symptoms. He sees also children with health problems, ranging from asthma and eczema to developmental delays and autism. Dr. Sesenig graduated from the National College of Naturopathic Medicine in Portland, Oregon, where he later served as Dean of Education. He was the founding president of the American Association of Naturopathic Medicine. I lost my place. and a chairman of its Government Affairs Committee for a decade, and the founding dean of the College of Naturopathic Medicine at the University of Bridgeport. Dr. Sesenig has consulted for a number of government agencies, insurance companies, colleges, and natural products companies. He is on the faculty of the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine in Tempe, Arizona, and the University of Bridgeport College of Naturopathic Medicine. Okay, so we are doing part 2 of Spiritual Dimension of Natural Healing, and the first question I want to ask is, I want to talk about paradigms.
Okay.
What is a paradigm?
A paradigm.
Paradigm.
Okay,
Okay.
the simplest way to think about a paradigm is your worldview. It's
Your worldview.
In other words, it's how you think the world is organized.
Okay.
It's what you believe about how things work.
Okay.
And then that shapes everything else.
Because we mentioned it a lot in the first part 1 of this show, and I wanted to explain it here in part 2 so that everyone can understand, no matter what.
Okay, well, I'll use 2 illustrations. One is the bigger one, the one we back off a little bit. The so-called scientific world of the 20th century has shown or worked in or attempted to define what's happening in nature in a physical way. And the belief system is that all of life is physical, that it's random, it's chaotic, there's no purpose to life. We just happen to show up on this planet somehow.
Right.
There are theories about how we grew out of the primordial soup.
Right.
That reminds me of a cartoon I saw one time where God was looking in the refrigerator and says, "Oy vey, I left the primordial soup in the refrigerator." Right? In any case, that viewpoint that's reflected in the way that science is done assumes, note the word, assumes that the world is physical only, that it, again, it's chaotic, it's malignant, bad things happen to good people.
Right.
We're the victims of
We're victims.
We're victims of
Everything.
Uncontrollable, random, unpurposeful, or a life without purpose.
Exactly.
We're just here hanging out as a life form on this rock. There's another paradigm, another view, another worldview, another way to understand it. And in that paradigm, which in this case is the opposing paradigm, is exactly the opposite of that one. In the other paradigm, life is, or life on this earth anyway, is orderly, and it's beneficent, and it's purposeful. Now, those are two competing worldviews.
Mm-hmm. They are.
You believe one or you believe the other.
Right.
You can't believe both. You can't believe that it's chaotic and random and we're victims of nature, and also believe that it's purposeful and orderly, and that the outcome that we have is a result of working against that. So you're either in one place or another.
Right.
So there's an example of paradigms at the highest level. And those two paradigms might define our world. But what I was trying to say in the past when we've talked about this is that the way we apply the scientific method depends on the paradigm. An example comes from, I know on the previous show I mentioned Bruce Lipton's book, Bruce Lipton, PhD, his book on the biology of belief. Mm-hmm. And he makes it quite obvious, and he makes this point strongly, that what we are doing is that the science of biology itself is based on what the scientist believes. So here's an example. If you believe in the mechanistic, chaotic, physical life without purpose, then when you are investigating the life of a cell, looking at biology at that cellular level,
right,
you're going to see those same things happening. You're going to see random events, and you're going to see that things go wrong, and you're going to see that there's no overall purpose to this except that it's fulfilling the life of the cell. On the other hand, and that's the world that leads to what everybody knows, or everybody thinks they know, that we're physical, that our cells are controlled by the cells themselves, that there's a nucleus in the cell, it has DNA, and the DNA is the end-all and the be-all, that everything about us is controlled by our DNA. That's one paradigm. The other paradigm would say, as Dr. Lipton himself began to understand, is that in a more orderly, purposeful, benign world, that's ridiculous. The DNA, as a physical structure, is not controlling the outcome of the cells. Something higher is doing that. So if you believe that that we're physical beings controlled by our physical cells on the physical level, then not only do you not see this other world, but you're not even going to ask questions about that other world because you're not in it.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
There's
Good point. This is all good points. Yeah.
An example that I can use from practice is, I remember years ago when I had somebody who came with what's supposed to be an incurable disease. But when I say supposed to be incurable, what I mean is in conventional medicine it's incurable. Because as you probably know, nothing in medicine is curable.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Because we don't know and nobody knows and we can treat the symptoms kind of thing. Well, there's an example right there. In the world of a mechanistic, physical, chaotic, random, malignant world, things fall apart. And the doctor sees his or her job as trying to repair that as it breaks down. The other paradigm in an organized, beneficent, orderly world is that if the order and the beneficence and the purpose is not there, then something's interfering with it. And the role of the physician is to help to restore the order. Because once you restore order, not treat symptoms, but restore order,
Restore order.
things go where they're supposed to go, if I can
Right.
say it that way.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, makes perfect
So an
sense.
example from practice is somebody who came to me with what was supposed to be, he was consulting with me about a specific problem. And I said, well, here's what we need to do. I'd like to do these tests and these tests, and we're going to do this and this, and so on and so forth. And while we're waiting for the test results to come back, I'm going to suggest you do this and this and this. And he said to me, you're speaking to me as if this is completely curable. And I said, well, it is. He said, but I was told that it's incurable. Now, there was a time in my career when I would have argued with that. But I simply said, this is later on in my life, I said, when he said it's incurable, I said, if you believe it is, it is. But in my world, it's not. So which world do you want to be in? I wasn't prepared to argue with him about what he believed.
Right.
I was just challenging him to decide which world. If you want to live in the world where this is incurable, then you're in the wrong place.
Right. You might as well leave, right?
Now, I don't mean to suggest that belief is everything. But in some ways, without the belief that it's possible, you're not even going to take that step.
No.
You're not going to do what the doctor's recommending in earnest, because in the back of your mind, you're saying to yourself, this is crazy. This is not curable. I know thousands of people with this problem, and they haven't been cured, so how am I going to be cured? Why am I going to be cured? So if the belief is not causing the problem, this is an important distinction, I think. If the belief is not actually causing the problem directly, it's causing the problem by interfering with the possibility, right?
Right.
If you don't think something's possible, you're not going to do it.
No, that's right.
Right?
Somewhere deep down in him, he must have thought it because he came to see you. Why did he come to see you if he didn't think it was curable?
Well,
What was his explanation? Did you ask him that?
no, in that case, I'm challenging him to make a choice. But I can think of another case that illustrates the same point. When I was first in practice, I saw a young man from New York City who'd come to me with a severe case of a digestive disorder. And after my initial intake and examination and my beginning to lay out a treatment plan for him, he said to me, do you think I'll ever get over this? Will I ever be cured? And I said, well, of course you will. Years later, I'm going to say it's another year and a half or so until his symptoms were completely gone. He's back to normal. The way we think of that parenthetically in naturopathic medicine is, I didn't cure the disease, I restored his health. I'm moving things back to normal.
Right.
Because in my paradigm, the body knows how to be orderly. It knows how to function properly under the right circumstances. My job is not to treat the illness. My job is to treat the patient.
Right.
By restoring the natural order.
Exactly.
So anyway, I'm going to say about 18, I'm making this up because it's been 40 years, but probably 18 months or so, he's back to normal, no symptoms, no signs of the disease, right? Years later, I'm going to say 10 years later, I get a letter from this fellow who wants to thank me for how I helped him. And he said, which is why I remember this, because he reminded me, he said, you probably don't remember this, but when I first came to see you, I asked you if I was ever going to get better, and you said, of course you will. He said, those words changed my life.
Oh.
Right? Because, as I later put this together with him, is he'd been to all the experts at the best hospitals in the Big Apple, right? And they all told him the same thing. This is incurable. So he was believing that because the best, quote-unquote, best experts are saying this is incurable, of course it's incurable.
Of course.
But when somebody in a position of authority, and I'm not setting myself up as an authority, but he put me in that position.
Right.
He came to me for
Right.
my advice, and when I said to him, of course, what I know now, back to the spirituality of health and healing and our thoughts, I'd go this far. I would say he was healed in that moment. And the moment that he changed his beliefs,
Right.
he allowed the possibility that he'd get better. Now, it took maybe a year and a half for his body or his physical being to catch up with that, but he had to change his beliefs first.
Yes.
And, if you think about those who are listening to what we're talking about right now, many people think I'm nuts and think you're nuts.
Right.
Oh, maybe not.
A lot of people think I'm nuts, yes.
Yeah, or they wouldn't tune into the show.
Yeah.
But let's assume that there are people who think we're nuts. Well, okay, you get to believe what you want.
That's right.
But if you believe that whatever it is that is troubling you cannot be corrected, well then guess what? It's not going to be corrected if you're working against that possibility.
That's right.
It's like, I think I've said in previous shows, we compare this paradigm change to the flat earth versus the round earth. Mm-hmm. And just to go back there for a second, if you believe the earth is flat and you sail all the way to the west, you're going to fall off the earth. If you believe the earth is round and you sail to the west, you're going to come all the way around to the east. There's new possibilities there. And when you change the way you think about it, you don't change the earth. You change your behavior.
That's right.
The earth stayed the same. The earth isn't different or new, but now what you can accomplish is different or new because you understand it differently. And the same with health and healing. If you understand that it's possible to restore normal structure and function to a certain degree. I mean, there's a point where on a continuum, all of us are too far along. You get to a point where there's too much damage done. You can't turn that around. Not at least we can't. I can't. If there's too much damage done to organs or systems, you're not going to turn that around. Now, maybe Christ can turn that around, or somebody who knows what they're doing at that level.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. But for those of us who are walking in the physical world, there's a point of no return. Mm-hmm. But within limits, there's a possibility of getting back to balance. But getting there requires the possibility. It requires the individual to at least allow the possibility that you can get there. Otherwise, you're just throwing roadblocks in your way. So, there's the paradigm thing.
Okay. Yeah, there's also been a lot of, I've read stories about people who have been near death's door, and because of their beliefs and their faith and changes in their attitudes and their minds and everything, they started to get healed.
Well, think about that for a second. I'm sure that most everybody who's listening has had or seen or know someone who's had that very experience. That something, whether it's death's door, well, maybe it's death's door in two ways. Maybe it's death's door towards the end of a life, or death's door from seemingly terminal illness, or maybe death's door is in the midst of a traffic accident or something. But they have an experience in that tragedy or in that seemingly challenging moment where something changes, where they come in touch with the possibility that there's more to life than the physical. And without experiencing it, without going there, the new revelation to them changes everything about who they are and what they do, and there's their miraculous healing.
That's right. You know, we haven't talked about this, but I was reading, and you have to, I don't know the exact time, but every so many years, the cells completely, your cells change, renew, or what is it?
Well, all the cells in your body, they're living cells, right? And they don't live as long as you do.
Right.
You're made up of millions and millions of cells. And you are basically a collection of cells.
Right.
I mean, you're an ecosystem that's built out of all these gazillion cells. But each, according to conventional mechanistic science, right, these cells don't live forever, so they're dying off. Mm-hmm. Different types of cells will die off faster than others, but they're constantly replaced. Replacing,
that's what I'm looking for.
So you're the same individual in some ways, but in other ways you're really not, because every 7 years or so, every cell in the body has had a chance to turn over to a new population.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
Now, some of these cells are turning over in 24 hours. And
So-
some of them are turning over many, many, many years.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have read of cases also where people have had cancer and they didn't do anything. They didn't take chemo, radiation, anything a doctor would say. They didn't see a naturopath, but I think they just went about their business, changed their way of thinking, the way of eating, and everything else, and they were completely cured. That those cells rejuvenated themselves over a period of time with the way they were thinking. Now, to my way of thinking, if you do the chemo and the radiation, which kills not only the cancer, but kills all the good cells in your body, not all of them, but it kills the good cells along with the bad, kills them dead. I mean, can't be rejuvenated. They're gone, right?
Right.
So your chances are much less.
Well,
that way.
Yeah,
How would you say that? How would
well,
you?
I think you just underscored this paradigmatic change again, the different worldviews. The worldview in the mechanistic, reductionistic, allopathic world, by which I mean conventional medicine,
Right.
is the cancer is the bad guy, and it's got to be destroyed.
Yeah.
So it's a combative practice of medicine. We're fighting against something. In this case, we're fighting the cancer. So the tools that are used will poison or burn or excise the cancer. Right? Excise meaning cut it out. Right. Well, drugs are not that selective. Chemotherapy, meaning the toxins that are used to kill the cancer, will kill all cells that it comes in contact with. The theory of chemotherapy, I should say the premise on which it's based, is if you can destroy the ability of a cell to reproduce, to make more cells, then you'll destroy the whatever, right? And so cancer is a rapidly dividing cell type or problem, right? So it's growing quickly compared to other organs, it's like compared to your bones, for example. And so if you can get a toxin in place that interrupts the reproduction of the cells, you can kill the cancer, which is true. However, that chemotherapy is also going to have a more, what shall I say, devastating effect on other cells that are turning over just as fast. And those are the cells that line your stomach. And those are your hair follicles, or the hair in the follicle. And those are the cells in your immune system. So this is why chemotherapy not only kills the cancer cells, but you lose your hair, you get nauseous, and you suppress your immune system. Because the drug is affecting all the cells that are turning over that fast.
Oh.
There's a different paradigm, though, if we come back to that. The paradigm there is we must kill this abnormal growth of cells because that's the problem. The other paradigm is that there's an abnormal growth of cells, and of course it's not one or the other, it can be both, but the other paradigm is that this rapidly dividing group of cells is occurring because something's not right, something's out of balance, something is different from normal in that individual.
Right.
And so in that approach to the healing arts, the emphasis is on normal function, restoring normal function, with the understanding that when you're normal, you're not sick. So there again, but this underscores for those who are listening, I have to emphasize this, that for many people, by the time they have cancer discovered in their bodies, they're very far along. And if those imbalances or those changes in the system that allow for that to happen in the first place are addressed or never happen, then you don't have that problem, theoretically.
Okay, based on what you said, I would think that people should not wait till they get cancer or a disease, that even when people are feeling good, they should make sure they're eating properly.
That would be the ideal.
Completely properly. And it's very hard these days because the foods are all injected with pesticides and a lot of this GMO.
It's extremely hard to be healthy.
Very much.
We have created a culture where, in my opinion, everything is working against us.
That's
if
right.
you want to be healthy, you need to be swimming upstream.
That's
You're
right.
making choices. In almost every case, you're making choices that are different from what the masses are choosing.
That's right.
And that goes from cell phone use to food.
That's right.
And everything in between.
Right. So you have to be very vigilant in what you put into your body. You really, really do. So,
but you just mentioned another aspect of this paradigm. In the existing medical paradigm, we wait until we have the symptoms, which
Right.
are the imbalance or the manifestation of the disturbance, and then we want to combat or turn off or suppress the symptoms.
that's right.
As opposed to going in the other direction and making sure we're in balance, i.e. as healthy as we can be, all the time.
All
you
the
don't
time.
wait for the
No.
problem to happen. And
That's
at the
right.
first sign of imbalance, you want to do something about it. And there's another part of the paradigm. In naturopathic medicine or in the natural healing arts, at the very first sign of something, the very first symptom, like I don't feel well, that's a sign your body's telling you something's wrong, you're off balance. You don't ignore that and wait. See, in conventional medicine, you're actually taught to wait till it gets worse.
Yeah.
How many times does a doctor say to somebody, well, let's keep an eye on it.
Right,
When it
yes,
gets worse, come back.
Exactly.
Right?
Mhm.
In a naturopathic practice, it's exactly the opposite, right? You have a little ache or pain here, and I'm not suggesting you run off to the doctor with every ache and pain, but you have to understand that those aches and pains are your body's way of telling you something, right? Something's out of balance. Now's the time to correct it, not 10 years from now when it manifests as something else.
That's right.
And people will think, and by the way, that's something we should probably tell the listeners, we have a medical system that has trained us to not bother us with, well, you're coming in here with a little this or that, right? It's exactly the opposite in naturopathic medicine. With this first sign, that's when we want to see you. This is especially true with children. You know, my kid's off. He's not acting right, right? That's actually the time to restore balance or intervene and not wait until he develops an ear infection, for example.
Right.
If you're in the conventional model, you have to wait until there's something to treat. But the something to treat is the end point.
And the symptom is what they're treating.
Right.
That's it.
Right. And one might take this further, go back to the spiritual aspects of this. The early writers in natural medicine, not just naturopathy, but in natural medicine worldwide, would suggest that the imbalance that we're feeling starts on the spiritual level, on the vibratory, energetic level, and then it manifests as the physical. So much so that health, in one system, health is defined as having no pain on the physical level. That is to say, no sensations. If you're sitting there thinking about your low back is hurting or your knees are hurting, your body's trying to tell you something. So ideally, in the ideal situation, you would have no awareness of your body parts, right? If you have a little bit of heartburn or your big toes throbbing or something, your consciousness is being drawn to that part of your body for a reason. This is the fire alarm, right?
Right.
But you can go to other levels. The same thing on the emotional level is thought of as being free from passion. Now, by passion, I don't mean being engaged in what you're doing and being fully engaged in life, but by being driven by your passions. You know, if there are, cravings or activities or whatever that drive you, then you're not in balance. And on the spiritual level, selflessness is considered to be in balance. Altruism, love, selflessness. If you have other negative qualities on the spiritual level, your spirit is trying to tell you something, right? So as healing occurs from the top down, not from the bottom up, you want to address those things if you can. You want to find somebody who can help you address those things before they manifest in an imbalance that's severe enough that could threaten your life.
That's right. So as I was saying, I've heard people say, oh, I can eat anything. I feel great. I can eat anything. I'm fine. So my thought is, start now, like you just said, take care of yourself, eat the right foods, make sure you're not eating those pesticides, get the right exercise, get the right sleep, and realize there's something more to life than what we have here right now, and start meditation, start asking yourself, what's life all about? That's when I started my spiritual path. If it's all about coming here, being here, like you said, we end up here, growing up, working, making money, getting material things, collecting all these things, having as much fun as you can, eating, doing whatever you want, and dying and leaving everything that you've done here, and it's gone, it's over. To me, there's got to be a meaning. I mean, don't you ever question meaning of your life, right?
Well, you know that there are people talking about paradigms now. You know that there's, I'm trying to think what they call themselves, the humanists, who will argue that there is no other anything.
I know.
Right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And they would say, sort of the opposite of what you have said, they would say, when you die and you're dead and that's it, you're going to be surprised that there is nothing else.
Yeah.
Right? So there's your paradigm again. You either believe that there's something, and it's a matter of belief. Now, in my way of thinking, belief, it has to do with a different reality. Believing that there's it's a matter of believing what's real or what's not real. Or again, it's the worldview that you have. My worldview convinces me that there's an invisible, unseen, immaterial world, because I see the manifestation of that all the time. So I believe that the reality is that, whereas there are people who believe the reality is otherwise. But that takes you back to this thing that we've been talking about. If you believe that there's no other to physical existence, then that's going to shape or drive your life in a certain way, because you frame the questions that you ask and the behavior that governs your life on this is all there is and I can do what I want and whatever.
Yeah.
If you believe that there's a something else, you might be concerned about how that informs this life, or how this informs, even if it's a limited life, how does it inform this life? So now you find yourself, because of your different paradigm or your different worldview, you find yourself asking different questions, and therefore coming up with different answers, right? You also said something about foods, if I can just run with that for a second. That's the most absurd thing I ever heard. I can eat whatever I want. The people who are telling us they can eat whatever they want are probably not very well, but they don't know that because they have nothing to compare it to. And I see this all the time in practice. Somebody, for reasons that where we'll do testing, for example, and we'll find that, and there's different ways to be sensitive to foods. It can involve your immune system, it can be energetic. There's many, many, many different ways in which somebody can reach a point where they're intolerant to certain foods or proteins. If that person is asked to give up those foods just for a while, let's just give this up. It could be wheat, it could be milk, it could be string beans. If you just give this up for 3-4 weeks, see how you feel. People will say, wow, I didn't know I could feel this well. I didn't know I could feel this good.
Yeah.
Who knew? Who knew the foods were effective? Well, you don't know unless you stop eating them for a while, right? But this is true on all levels. Natural healing arts of all kinds tell us that there's only 3 things that we ever have to worry about. What you put into the system, what you take out of the system. In other words, you can put in, or you should put in, only those things that are found in the system and nourish it. Things that are assimilable by the body, can be used by the body.
Yeah.
You also have to take out the waste. Every metabolic process, that is every process in every cell, at every level, and every organ, creates waste products. Those waste products have to be removed. On the cellular level, they have to get out of the cells. On the organism level, they got to get out of your body. And you have to have enough of the energy or the signaling or that force that we talk about to make it work, to run. So we talk about this in the philosophy of natural healing. You got to have to give the body what it needs. You take out the garbage and make sure there's enough vital force to run the situation. However, that applies at all levels of our being. On the emotional level, we have to give the body what it needs. We have to take out the garbage, the emotional garbage. And we have to have enough of a vitality or a passion to make that work. And at the spiritual level, you have to give the body what it needs. You have to have nourishing, we can use the word food, whatever word, let's use that word because we had it, or we referred to it. You have to have the right spiritual food. You have to have the right food to feed the spirit.
That's right.
Now this is thoughts, right?
That's right.
And you have to take out the garbage, which are the negative thoughts, right? And you have to have enough of a self-awareness to make that happen, right? So it's all the same. It's not, the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual are all the same. They're all running on the same rules.
Same rules, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you think about, we go back to this, the amount of emotional garbage or the amount of spiritual garbage that people are consuming. And if you are not aware of, if you have no self-awareness, how would you even know? That's where you can say, well, I can eat anything I want. I can listen to anything I want. I can watch any movie I want. I can read anything I want. It doesn't matter. In my world, it matters. It matters what you put in there, because that's either going to nourish you and move you towards balance and health, or it's going to move you away from it.
Whether it's physical or emotional
or spiritual. Absolutely.
That's right. We are those three things. We are. And the other thing I was going to tack on to that last thing I said was that if you do take care of your health, if you do eat the right things, and you make sure and you get the right exercise, and you do all those things, and you still become ill, or you still can't cure it, then that goes into another thing, which I truly believe is karma. This was meant to happen. You chose it, and you're going to go through it. So no matter which way it is, you have to have that faith and that belief and that knowledge.
Well, there are certainly many, many traditions that would say that it's not just what you're thinking about or doing, and doing is important. It's not just the thoughts, but the doing, the action. Every action has a consequence.
Yep, as a reaction, right.
Right. I mean, it would be absurd to think otherwise. Even the reductionistic science of our day says that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. Another way to say that is every action has a consequence, right? And so if that's not happening in the here and now, in this lifetime, in this moment, in the next few minutes, it's certainly happening over time. And it's not, the one thing that will get people off the hook, because that sometimes really sounds very judgmental and like you brought this on. But think about what we're doing on a cultural and a societal level. We have created one heck of a mess on this planet. We've polluted the earth. Mm-hmm. We have filled it with chemicals. We have poisoned every life form on the planet. We're poisoning ourselves. We have no respect for nature. We're cutting down the forests, the rainforest, that some people call the lungs of the earth. We've polluted the oceans. They're now acidic. Everything's changing.
We're killing millions and billions of animals daily all over the world.
Animals and microbes and people. Mm-hmm. Now those consequences are consequences of our actions. Maybe not your actions or my actions, but actually all of our actions, because we're buying stuff in plastic and we're demanding that we have antibacterial soaps or whatever. So as a culture, we are collectively engaged in actions that have consequences for us. Mm-hmm. And here we are at a time in history where those consequences are having dire effects, not just on us individually, but also on the planet as a whole.
That's right. And you started to say at the end of the last show, well, let me just clear something up first. When I say karma, what it means is that something you had not learned but decided when you were on the other side before you came back that you wanted to learn it, you wanted to do it, you wanted to clear it up, and that's why you chose what you were going to do in this lifetime. and they call it karma. It's the word has a bad rap, as they say.
Right.
It just means what you chose to do in this lifetime, what you chose to go through. All your choice. Never was put on top of you. You decided it. So that's what I want to say about that. Not being judgmental, but that's just a fact. But the other thing I wanted to say, when we finished the last show, we were starting to talk about the way that people are acting today in this world today. Mm-hmm. All the terrible things that are going on in people's minds, and killings and the shootings and the this and that and the other. Now that's a perfect example of taking God out of, or whatever you call the divine being, anything you want to call, taking it out of the life. And there's nothing to replace it. So that there's chaos.
That reminds me that
that
reminds me of the bumper sticker that says that when the power of love becomes greater than the love of power, we will have peace on earth.
Exactly. I have seen that.
Right?
Exactly true.
Now, speaking of that, in one of the books that I mentioned, I think on the last show, the book, maybe I mentioned it on this one, Power versus Force by David Hawkins. He talks about this idea of the power of thought, the power of love. And one of the book is for me, I thought it was a difficult read. It was difficult to understand. But there were several points in that book that were, I'm going to say, life-changing moments. And one of them was this. He was able, and again, without getting into the details, he was able to look at the power of a thought. A thought is a thing. It takes some energy to have a thought.
Yeah, it does.
But what he found was that your everyday random, these are my words, not his, but as I understand it, your everyday sort of random, unfeathered thought, your sort of default thought, your impulsive thoughts have a certain level of energy. But a loving thought is more powerful than that. And not by just a little, by 10 to the exponent of 700 million. Now, most people may not know what I'm talking about here. This is scientific notation where you take 10, if you take 10 times 10, that would be 10 to the second power, because you have 10 times 10 twice. So 10 to the 700 million is 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, 700 million times. That number is incalculable. It's beyond human imagination. Like 10 times 10 is 100. So 10 to the 2 is 100. 10 to the 6 is a million. 10 to the 9 is a billion. Okay. 10 to the 12 is a quadrillion.
Okay.
Now we're talking 10, not 10 to the 12. 10 to the 12 is 1 quadrillion. We're talking 10 to the 700 million. There's a number, my kids probably know what it is, Googleplex or something like that, right?
Yeah,
Some huge number.
I have no idea myself. Yeah,
But a conscious, loving thought, according to Hawkins, is 10 to the 700 million more powerful than a negative thought, which is why people know, and some believe, and some, of course, doubt, that a conscious thought is balancing out, on an energetic level, so many hundreds of thousands of negative thoughts.
Okay.
This is why one person who's fully conscious or fully realized, some people would say, like the greatest avatars of all time, the most conscious people of all time, are actually counterbalancing the negativity of all these negative thoughts. However, back to what you're saying, there are those who believe that we're living at a time where the negativity is now greater than the positivity. And so the question for all of us on the earth is, which way is it going to go?
Mm. You're right.
And because it's not just the thinking, and it's not just the violence we see in our societies, but you see, everything's connected to everything. The violence in our society is the same violence that we perpetrate against the earth itself. against the plants, against the trees, against the animals, against each other. It's not just violence over here and love and peace over here.
No.
It's all the same. It's all interconnected.
That's right. So let's talk a little bit. We got about 15 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about how the spirituality enters. I read a book called Recognize and Heal Yourself.
Okay.
Okay? How the spirituality enters into healing of the body.
Well, it depends on what you mean by spirituality. But if you take it in the direction I was going with these systems of healing, where spirituality refers to the spirit, right, and the vibrational level, the immaterial level, the way it figures into healing is the word heal and whole are the same word.
Okay.
This is one of the things that pushes my buttons when people talk about holistic healing. They're the same word. That's like saying holistic, or healing.
Right.
Right. They're from the same base word. To be whole is the same to be in health.
To be in good health, right? Exactly.
And by the way, those are the same root words that are also translated in the Bible as salvation.
Ah.
Your salvation, your healing, your being made whole are all the same.
Look at that. I didn't think about that.
That's why you might say something's lost in the translation when Christ comes upon the man at Bethesda who asks for his help. He says, "Wilt thou be made whole?" In today's language, he's basically saying, "Are you ready to be healed?" But it's the same word. It's
Same word, yes,
it's
right,
the same
yeah.
phrase. So, but that means at all levels. So if your vibratory spirit world is not in balance, is not whole, is not healthy, your body's not going to be healthy, right? So spiritual healing can mean, to some people, being in touch with other beings or being in touch with another side of life. There are writers who talk about being in touch with God, praying to whomever you pray to, the angels or the invisible helpers or those who have gone before, to quote one person. But also, in a more sort of mundane way, it can mean that you've got to get your act together on the vibratory level so that it can reflect through the spiritual level.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you go back to something I think I mentioned on the last show about some work that followed, I think, 70,000 people for 27 years, they found that these emotional, spiritual imbalances and disturbances that people had carried through their life as a result of childhood abuse, for example, informed their whole life. Informed everything about them, including more illness, more visits to the ER, terminal diseases, and so on and so forth. And again, where was that? Was that living in their physical body? Was their physical body informed by that disturbance? And so, I don't know if that answers where you're going with that, but well, you can't ignore the spirit and try to heal. You can't heal the body by not healing the spirit, right? I mean, how could you do that?
And if you heal the spirit, it'll heal the body. On the other side of that, other way around.
Well,
same
again,
thing.
they're one and the same.
Yeah.
They're one and the same.
Right.
This idea that the spirit and the non-physical is somehow not here is a creation of the last 200 years. Actually, it's a new idea. The people who lived before us, hundreds of years ago and thousands of years ago, they never entertained the idea that they were different. It's a brand new thing. Mm. It's in Western science, it's attributed to a person named René Descartes, who was a scientist in the I'm trying to think when he was around, but the idea was that in order to be able to do science, they had to divorce themselves from the idea that there was a spirit, Otherwise, he'd be in trouble with the church.
Oh,
And that's
really?
where the whole thing starts. That's the beginning of the now belief, the paradigm. That is the beginning of, in Western, anyway, in Western medicine, it's the beginning of the belief that the spirit is completely divorced from the physical body. See, in other cultures, they never went there. They've always understood that. So the older cultures on the planet still have a way of understanding life that's informed by a paradigm or a belief or a worldview that includes the non-physical as part of who we are.
You know who I always I have the utmost respect for, and always thought that they really knew all about that, everything like that you're talking about, is the Native Americans. In the beginning, when they lived on the land, and everything that they did, and they believed in the spirit, they believed in the Great Spirit, which was God, and they believed in the spirit in the animals. When they had to kill an animal for food in the winter, they used every bit of it. They prayed for its soul, because animals have souls, and plants have part souls and minerals and all that. They did that. They had the utmost respect for all life, and the healing, and everything that they did, all natural things that they did. That was a beautiful culture. That is something we should study more about, that kind of culture at that time, the Native Americans. And I'm sure there's so many of them, probably more, 3/4 of them still practice that now, even though their living conditions are deplorable, some of them. So,
Well, and there's an example right there of the judgment and the hatred and the racism and the xenophobia that we live with. I mean, we're talking about all kinds of things in our culture right now, but we're not talking about what we did to the Native Americans.
that was the worst of all of them. Nobody realizes that.
Right.
Nobody realizes it. Everybody complains that their race got it bad. That was the worst.
Yeah, you talk about being on the receiving end of that hatred and judgment and so on. There's probably well, I shouldn't say that, because there's always many different groups. You know, you remind me of something I read on this subject. Black Elk Speaks. Black Elk was a native healer, and I believe, I could be wrong about this, I think he was Cherokee. He was in Cherokee tribe. And he wrote a book, maybe he wrote more than one, but towards the end of his life, about his experience with the white man and so on. But one thing I remember very vividly was two of the things that really affected him greatly was when the white man came along to teach the natives about God.
Yeah. Can you believe it?
He said the first thing that struck him around the little church that they built was that they had a little fence around the grass. And he just thought that was absurd, how they were trying to fence in nature. That's how he interpreted it, right? That the grass is free, the grass is for everyone, it's part of nature, it should be everywhere, and here we're trying to fence it in. But the other thing that struck him was that all these Native American children were forced to change their dress and cut their hair in order to go into a church where they were shown pictures of the white man's Savior, Jesus, who had long hair, right? So I had to cut my hair to come learn about your Savior who has long hair. What happened there?
Unbelievable. Everything is a lesson. Okay, tell me, we talked about this in the last show about self-awareness. What does that mean to you, self-awareness? We got about 5 minutes left.
I want to make one more comment about spirit.
Sure.
I remember when I lived in Korea, way back in the last century, when I was living in Korea, I said something to some of my Korean friends about God. And I remember one person in particular who almost died laughing, saying, you believe that God is like sitting up there on a cloud somewhere, like there's this individual who's holding out, or what should I say, handing out judgment for everything? And I remember as this young man trying, what? And I was told, God is everywhere. God is in everything. This is the force of life, the creator, that's in everything. The Creator's not separate from us. The Creator is part of us. There's a paradigm again, right? Mm-hmm. When you believe in the other paradigm, that kind of shakes you up. So self-awareness, that's a good question. I hadn't even thought about that. But if I have to answer the question, I would say it this way. Self-awareness comes at the point when you are aware of what you're doing. You're aware of who you are. It's almost like, for me, the way I would attempt to answer that, it's what other traditions call not self-awareness, but like self-realization.
Right.
You're aware of the fact that you are. You're not just being and not just going through life, being buffeted by the forces and your emotions mm-hmm. and whatever's on TV, but you're able to step back, and you're, in some traditions, that's called being the observer. There's a part of you that's watching what you're doing,
yes,
watching what you're saying, watching what you're eating, watching what you're thinking. You're now, I don't want to say removed from, but you're more objective about yourself. And you're watching that carefully, and you're judging yourself. Maybe judging isn't the right word. You're disciplining yourself. You're not just being run by impulse,
right,
but you're being run by consciousness. You're making conscious contributions to who you are and who you want to be.
And that governs your growth. You're in all ways, right?
Neil Donald Walsh says in one of his books called Conversations with God,
yeah.
He says the greatest mystery or the greatest secret of life is that this is not a journey of discovery. We're not here to learn anything. We already know it all.
We're here to remember.
We're here to remember.
Yes.
We're here to, and think of that word, remember.
Remember.
Bring it back together.
That's right.
Go
ahead.
And he says, think about not what you, think about, when you think about that, think about who you want to be. Because you are consciously creating yourself.
That's right.
And so self-awareness brings that full circle, I think.
On that note, we have to stop. It's already been an hour, and I can't believe it.
No way.
And that's a good note to leave the show on.
Okay.
We are here to remember. We want to give the contact information. Dr. James Sesenig at 203-230-2200. His business is Natural Health Associates in Hamden, Connecticut. His website is www.naturalhealthconnecticut.com. And for me, it's Rosemary Lachance. My phone number is 203-627-7966. My email is whitebuffalo8@comcast.net. And my website is www.rosemarylachance.com. And we'd love to hear from you, both the doc and I. If you have any questions about anything that we can help you with, please feel free to contact us. Thank you.
Yeah,
it's been
my pleasure.
wonderful. And look forward to seeing you again in the future, because Doc is going to do some shows with me I'm very excited about. We'll tell you more about that in the future. So you everyone take care, have a good life, and good night.
Where dreams can be lost or found. As you look out through the window to the world you have made, always know you are the vision